Professor Zandril Quaxx stared at his class of 23 students with what passed for a smile among the Viridian species, a slight rippling of his facial tendrils that made him look like he was suffering from indigestion rather than expressing pleasure. Not that I could blame him. Teaching strategic fleet operations to this bunch would give anyone stomach cramps. "Welcome, students, to your final examination in advanced tactical fleet maneuvers," Quaxx announced, his voice carrying that trademark Viridian warble that always made me think of a dying accordion. "Today will determine whether you graduate to become officers aboard our glorious galactic coalition vessels, or whether you spend the next 5 cycles scrubbing waste extraction units on a mining colony. Oh yes, nothing motivates young cadets like the threat of cleaning space toilets. Typical Quaxx drama." The professor's 6 eyes scanned the classroom before settling on the back corner. "Ah, and look who decided to grace us with her presence. Our token human, Cadet Petra Morgan." Every head turned toward the back row. There she sat, the Deathworlder, calmly sipping from her thermal container, probably that bitter earth stimulant they call coffee. I swear she bathes in the stuff. I should introduce myself. I'm Trazix Noor, top of our class and next in line to become junior tactical officer on the Coalition flagship. Or at least, that was the plan until the human showed up 3 cycles ago. Since then, I've been, well, let's just say I've had to work harder. Morgan didn't even flinch at Quaxx's attempt to embarrass her. She merely raised her eyebrows, those strange strips of facial hair humans have, and nodded. "Wouldn't miss it, Professor," she replied with a slight curl to her lips. The human expression they call a smirk. It's remarkable how they can convey so much disrespect with such subtle facial movements. "Excellent," Quaxx warbled, mandibles clicking in what I recognized as irritation. "Then perhaps you'll favor us with your undivided attention? Or is our curriculum too simplistic for your Deathworld tactical genius?" Several students tittered nervously. Everyone knew Quaxx had it out for Morgan. Humans were relatively new to the Galactic Coalition, and many instructors considered them too aggressive and unpredictable to serve on Coalition vessels. The fact that Morgan consistently scored in the top percentile only seemed to aggravate them more. "Not at all, Professor," Morgan replied, setting down her drink. "I find your curriculum illuminating." The way she paused before illuminating made it clear she meant the exact opposite. I had to admire her nerve, even as I plotted how to beat her in today's examination. "Then you'll be thrilled to participate in today's challenge," Quaxx announced, gesturing dramatically as the room's lighting dimmed and the central holographic projector activated. "This simulation will test everything you've learned. Your objective is simple. Defend the Proxima colony against a surprise attack by Korvaxian raiders." A detailed star map materialized above us, showing the Proxima system with its habitable planet, orbital stations, and defensive fleet positions. The Korvaxians were a particularly nasty bunch of space pirates who specialized in hit-and-run tactics. "Each of you will have 15 minutes to program your defensive strategy," Quaxx continued. "The simulation will then run your tactics against the Korvaxian attack force. Your grade depends on casualties sustained, infrastructure preserved, and enemy vessels neutralized." Standard stuff. I'd been preparing for this exact scenario for weeks. The Korvaxians always attacked from behind planetary bodies, using gravity wells to mask their approach. The key was to position sensor arrays in a 3-dimensional grid that. "Oh, and one more thing," Quaxx interrupted my thoughts, his voice dripping with false sweetness. "As a special challenge, your defensive fleet will be operating with 25% less ships than standard protocol recommends." Several students gasped. A few cursed in their native languages. This changed everything. With reduced forces, standard defensive formations would be stretched too thin. "That's impossible," protested Valko, a 4-armed Rendulian with an unfortunate tendency to shed stress scales all over the classroom floor. "The minimum safe threshold for defending a colony of that size is 30 vessels. You're giving us less than 25. Exactly, Quaxx agreed, looking absolutely delighted at our discomfort. Welcome to real-world tactical command, cadets. Resources are never optimal. Adapt or fail. His eyes swiveled toward Morgan again. Perhaps our human colleague would like to explain how her species would handle such a scenario? With all that famous Earth ingenuity? I glanced back at Morgan. For once, she wasn't smiling. Her eyes, only two of them, how do humans even manage with such limited vision, were fixed on the holographic display, studying it intently. I'd rather show than tell, Professor, she finally answered. If that's all right with you. Quaxx made that rippling facial movement again. By all means, Cadet Morgan, show us all how it's done. Spawns. The simulation terminals at our workstations activated, and the classroom fell silent as everyone began programming their defensive strategies. I immediately started plotting sensor positions and ship formations, trying to compensate for our reduced numbers. The standard approach would be to create a layered defense, with faster ships on the outer perimeter and heavier battleships protecting the colony itself. But with our limited resources, those layers would be dangerously thin. I needed something better. As I worked, I couldn't help glancing over at Morgan. Unlike the rest of us frantically inputting commands, she sat there for nearly 5 minutes, just staring at the display, occasionally taking notes on her datapad. What was she plotting? When she finally began entering her strategy, her fingers moved with surprising speed. Humans may lack additional limbs, but they compensate with remarkable manual dexterity. 5 minutes remaining, Cadets, Quaxx announced, pacing between our workstations. He paused behind Morgan, watching her work with obvious skepticism. An interesting approach, Cadet Morgan. Though I question whether sacrificing defensive coverage in Quadrant 4 is wise. Morgan didn't respond, continuing to input commands with rapid precision. 1 minute remaining. I finalized my strategy, feeling reasonably confident. I'd created an adaptive formation that could reposition quickly to respond to Korvaxian emergence points. It wasn't perfect, but given our limitations, it should perform adequately. Time's up. Hands off your terminals. The room hushed as Quaxx returned to the front. Now, we'll run each of your strategies against the same Korvaxian attack pattern. The results will be displayed publicly for all to see and learn from. Who would like to volunteer to go first? Nobody raised a hand, appendage, or tentacle. No volunteers? Very well. Let's start with Cadet Noor. Of course. I straightened my posture and tried to look confident as my strategy was loaded into the main simulation. The holographic display zoomed out to show the entire Proxima system, with my fleet formations highlighted in green. Initiating Korvaxian attack, Quaxx announced. Red dots appeared at the system's edge, right where I predicted, emerging from behind Proxima's outer gas giant. My sensor grid detected them immediately, and my defensive vessels began maneuvering to intercept. The simulation accelerated, showing the battle unfold in minutes rather than hours. My strategy held initially, with the first wave of Korvaxians meeting strong resistance. But then a second wave emerged from an unexpected vector, using Proxima's sun to mask their approach. Oh no, I muttered, watching as my thinly spread forces struggled to reposition. By the time the simulation ended, I'd lost 40% of my fleet, and the colony had sustained significant damage to its orbital infrastructure. Not a complete disaster, but certainly not the triumph I'd hoped for. A solid effort, Cadet Noor, Quaxx commented, though his tone suggested otherwise. But your approach leaves too many vulnerabilities when facing multiple attack vectors. One by one, other cadets' strategies were tested. Some performed worse than mine, a few marginally better. No one achieved better than 30% fleet losses, and all strategies allowed some damage to the colony. Finally, only Morgan remained. And now let's see what our human cadet has devised, Quaxx announced, making no effort to hide his skepticism. The holographic display reset, loading Morgan's fleet positions. Immediately, murmurs rippled through the classroom. Her formation made no sense. Rather than creating a defensive perimeter, she'd clustered most of her ships near the colony itself, leaving minimal outer defenses. Even stranger, she'd positioned several vessels in seemingly random locations throughout the system, far from any strategic position. "This is certainly unorthodox, Cadet Morgan," Quaxx remarked. "Care to explain your thinking before we run the simulation?" Morgan shrugged, leaning back in her seat. "I'd rather let the results speak for themselves, Professor." Quaxx's facial tendrils twitched in annoyance. "Very well. Initiating Korvaxian attack." The red dots appeared just as before, emerging from behind the gas giant. But this time, something unexpected happened. As the Korvaxian fleet advanced, they suddenly found themselves under attack from behind. "What the?" Valko blurted out. Those seemingly random ships Morgan had positioned? They weren't random at all. They were exactly where the Korvaxians would pass, hidden in the magnetic fields of small moons and asteroid clusters. Classic ambush tactics. But that wasn't all. As the Korvaxians attempted to regroup, the second wave emerged from behind the sun and ran straight into a minefield Morgan had deployed. "Mines? That wasn't in the parameters," protested another student. Actually, Morgan spoke up for the first time. The simulation allows for deployment of autonomous weapon platforms. "I just reprogrammed them to function as proximity mines." The Korvaxian forces, caught between the ambush and the minefield, were in disarray. Those that made it through still had to face Morgan's concentrated fleet near the colony. The simulation ended with a stunning result. 80% of Korvaxian forces destroyed, 15% retreated, and only 5% even reached the colony's defense perimeter. Morgan had lost just 3 ships out of 23. The classroom was dead silent. Even Quaxx seemed at a loss for words. How did you know they would use the sun as a second approach vector?" he finally asked. Morgan smiled that irritating smile again. "I didn't. But if I were attacking and saw the main defense clustered around the colony, I'd try to flank it. The sun provides the best cover for that approach, so I prepared for it." "But that leaves your primary defense too concentrated in a real engagement." "In a real engagement," Morgan interrupted, "psychological warfare is as important as tactical positioning. By making my main force visible, I presented an obvious target that shaped my opponent's decisions. They saw what I wanted them to see." I couldn't believe it. She'd not only anticipated the attack patterns, she'd manipulated them. It was brilliant, unorthodox, and exactly the kind of thinking our carefully calculated Galactic Coalition tactics never considered. Quaxx's facial tendrils were practically vibrating with agitation. This is not standard doctrine, Cadet Morgan." "No, sir," she agreed pleasantly. "It's winning doctrine." A few students actually laughed out loud at that. I should have been jealous, and part of me was, but mostly I was fascinated. In that moment I understood why humans had survived their death world and risen to join the galactic community so quickly. They didn't just adapt to problems, they changed the rules of engagement entirely. Quaxx dismissed the class shortly after, but not before announcing through gritted mandibles that Morgan had achieved the highest score in the history of the Academy for this particular examination. As we filed out, I caught up to her in the corridor. "That was impressive," I admitted. "Thanks, Nor," she replied. "Your strategy wasn't bad either. Very textbook." I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "How did you come up with that approach? It violated every principle of defensive deployment we've been taught." Morgan laughed, a strange barking sound that humans make when amused. "But that's the problem with principles, Nor. They're great until they get in the way of winning." But you risked everything on predicting your opponent's psychology. What if they hadn't taken the bait? She shrugged those oddly narrow human shoulders. Then I would have lost. But they did take it, because I understood what they wanted more than they understood what I was doing. As she walked away, sipping her bitter coffee concoction, I realized something that both excited and terrified me. The Galactic Coalition had never encountered a species like humans before. And something told me the galaxy would never be the same again. Little did I know just how right I was, and how soon I would see Morgan's unique approach to strategy tested not in a classroom, but in actual combat, with real lives hanging in the balance. 3 weeks after the infamous strategy class, I found myself aboard the Coalition vessel Relentless Justice, serving as junior tactical officer under Commander Vex Garridan. The assignment should have been a dream come true. Instead, I was stuck monitoring long-range sensors while Morgan, now Ensign Morgan, had somehow landed the role of Special Tactical Advisor despite being fresh out of the academy. Maintaining standard patrol vector, Commander, reported our navigator, a slender phalanxe named Lorelei, whose 4 arms danced across the control surfaces with practiced precision. Commander Garridan grunted acknowledgement. A massive Volterite with mottled blue skin and a reputation for strict adherence to regulations. Garridan was exactly the sort of by-the-book officer who should have despised Morgan's unorthodox methods. Yet here she was, standing at his right hand while I calculated sensor calibrations in the corner. "Ensign Morgan, your assessment of the sector?" Garridan rumbled. Morgan studied the tactical display, that perpetual cup of coffee in her hand. "I swear humans must have evolved from creatures that subsisted entirely on bitter stimulants." "Too quiet, Commander," she replied. "The fringe colonies reported Korvaxian activity near Junction Station 6 days ago, but we haven't detected so much as a thruster flare since entering the sector." "Korvaxians are scavengers," Garridan dismissed. "They hit soft targets and run. Our presence alone is deterrent enough." Morgan's lips tightened slightly. "With respect, sir, Korvaxians don't just disappear. They adapt." I couldn't help myself. "The sensor grid shows clear space in all directions, Ensign. Perhaps your experience with simulations has given you an inflated sense of Korvaxian capabilities?" Several bridge officers smothered laughs. Morgan didn't even glance my way. "Permission to run a diagnostic on the long-range sensors, Commander?" she asked instead. Garridan raised one scaly eyebrow ridge. "You suspect equipment malfunction, Ensign?" "Not malfunction, sir. Manipulation." That got everyone's attention. Garridan considered her request for a moment, then nodded. "Proceed, Ensign. But make it quick. We're due at Proxima Colony in 6 hours." "Yes, that Proxima Colony. The same one from our simulation. Life has a sense of humor, doesn't it?" Morgan moved to my station, and I reluctantly slid aside to give her access. Up close, I noticed the dark circles under her eyes. Had she been sleeping at all? "Looking for ghost ships, Morgan?" I muttered as she began the diagnostic sequence. "Something like that," she murmured, focused on the readouts. Her fingers moved with that same rapid precision I remembered from class. After several minutes, she straightened up. "Commander, I've found something." Garridan moved to join us, his massive frame casting a shadow over the console. "Report, Ensign." "The sensors are functioning perfectly," Morgan explained, "but they're being fed false return data. Someone has introduced a subtle feedback loop in the signal processing algorithm. We're essentially seeing what we expect to see, empty space, rather than what's actually out there." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. The calibration protocols would detect any signal tampering." "Not if the tampering occurred before our last calibration cycle," Morgan countered. "Look at this timestamp. The algorithm was modified exactly 17 days ago, while the Relentless Justice was docked at Starbase 12 for routine maintenance. Garriden's expression darkened. Are you suggesting sabotage, Ensign? I'm suggesting we're flying blind, sir. And I don't think that's a coincidence. The commander was silent for a moment, his inner eyelids flickering rapidly, a Volterite sign of intense thought. Can you bypass the compromised systems? Morgan nodded. I can route sensor data through the navigation subsystems. They use separate processing channels. It won't give us full capabilities, but it should show us what's really out there. Do it, Garriden ordered. We watched as Morgan reconfigured the sensor links. The tactical display flickered, then refreshed. What we saw made my blood run cold. Korvaxian vessels. Not just a few raiders, but a full battle fleet, at least 30 ships, currently in a holding pattern behind the system's outer moon, right where our regular patrol route would take us in approximately 20 minutes. By the void, whispered Lorelei from the navigation station. How did they assemble such a force without intelligence picking it up? They've been planning this for months, Morgan said grimly. Probably paid off maintenance crews at Starbase 12 to modify our sensors during routine servicing. They're not just raiders anymore. This is an organized military operation. Garriden's face hardened. Battle stations. All hands to combat readiness. Communications, send emergency alert to Coalition Command. The bridge erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to their positions. Warning klaxons sounded throughout the ship. Communications are being jammed, Commander, reported the comms officer, a nervous-looking Tellurian whose antennae were practically vibrating with anxiety. I can't get a signal out. They were waiting for us to discover them, I realized aloud. They wanted us to find them just before we were in weapons range, when it would be too late to call for help. Tactical assessment, Officer Noor? Garriden demanded. I studied the display, calculating odds rapidly. We're outgunned and outnumbered, sir? 30-to-1 odds. Even with superior coalition technology, we can't survive a direct engagement. Can we outrun them? Garriden asked the navigation officer. Lorelei shook her head, all four hands making emphatic negative gestures. Not possible, sir. Their formation blocks all escape vectors, and their lighter vessels have superior acceleration. The commander turned to Morgan. Ensign, this seems like an appropriate time for one of those unorthodox human strategies. Any suggestions? Morgan was already studying the tactical display. Sir, we can't fight them all and we can't run. But we might be able to do something they won't expect. I'm listening, Ensign. We surrender. The bridge went dead silent. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's your brilliant strategy? I blurted. We just give up? Morgan shot me an irritated look. Not give up, nor. We surrender the ship. Specifically, we offer to hand over the Relentless Justice in exchange for our lives. Garriden's expression was unreadable. Explain your reasoning, Ensign. The Korvaxians went to extraordinary lengths to ambush a single coalition vessel. Why? We're not carrying valuable cargo. We're not a particularly strategic asset. But we are the newest model of coalition heavy cruiser. Morgan tapped the ship schematics on the display. I think they want the ship intact. Specifically, they want our quantum fold drive technology. That's why they're using this elaborate trap rather than just attacking us directly. I hated to admit it, but her logic was sound. The Relentless Justice was the first vessel in our sector equipped with the new QF drive system, capable of micro-jumps within a planetary system, technology the Korvaxians would desperately want. You're suggesting we use their desire for our technology as leverage, Garriden mused. Exactly. We open communications, offer to surrender the ship in exchange for safe passage for the crew. While negotiations proceed, we secretly prepare the ship for self-destruction. They'll scan for such preparations, I pointed out. Standard Korvaxian protocol includes monitoring for power fluctuations in the reactor core. Morgan smiled that infuriating smile again. We won't touch the reactor. Instead, we'll use the weapons systems. Specifically, we'll reconfigure 6 photon torpedoes to detonate inside their launcher tubes once the Korvaxians take control of the ship. The explosion will be channeled inward. What inward? Destroying the QF drive and rendering the technology unsalvageable. Garrison considered this. And our crew? We evacuate to escape pods during the handover process. The Korvaxians will be focused on securing the ship, not tracking every pod. If we time it right, we can get clear before the detonation. And if they decide to simply destroy us anyway? I challenged. Morgan shrugged. Then we're no worse off than facing them in direct combat. At least this way we have a chance. The commander made his decision quickly. Implement Ensign Morgan's plan. Communications. Open a channel to the Korvaxian fleet when they approach. Weapons. Begin torpedo modifications, but keep power signatures minimal. Engineering. Prepare for emergency core shutdown sequences. All other departments. Prepare evacuation protocols. 20 tense minutes later, the Korvaxian fleet moved into formation around us. Their command vessel, a massive, ugly contraption that looked like it had been assembled from salvaged parts of a dozen different ships, took position directly ahead. Channel open, sir, announced the communications officer. Garrison stood tall. This is Commander Vex Garrison of the Coalition vessel Relentless Justice. We are aware of your superior force and position. We wish to discuss terms of surrender. A harsh laugh came through the comm system. The view screen activated to show a Korvaxian commander, a reptilian humanoid with scarred green scales and cybernetic implants protruding from one side of his face. Surrender? How unexpected. The mighty coalition, reduced to begging. The Korvaxian's voice was like gravel being crushed. What terms could you possibly offer, Commander? The safe evacuation of my crew in exchange for an intact vessel, Garrison replied steadily. The Relentless Justice is equipped with the latest coalition technology. I assume that's why you went to such lengths to trap us here. The Korvaxian commander's expression shifted slightly, surprise, perhaps, that we had figured out their motives so quickly. Your crew has 10 minutes to evacuate in escape pods, the Korvaxian finally said. Any crew remaining aboard after that time will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. Any attempt to damage the vessel will result in the immediate destruction of all escape pods. Am I clear, Commander? Perfectly, Garrison replied. We begin evacuation now. The view screen deactivated. Immediately, Garrison turned to Morgan. Will 10 minutes be enough? She nodded. The torpedo modifications are nearly complete. We'll set them on a 30-minute timer, long enough for the Korvaxians to complete their inspection of the vessel and begin systems analysis of the QF drive. All hands, Evacuation Protocol Alpha, Garrison announced ship-wide. This is not a drill. Proceed to escape pods immediately. The bridge crew began filing out while Morgan, myself, and the commander remained to complete final preparations. The torpedoes are ready, I reported, finishing the last calculations. Remarkably, Morgan's plan was actually working. Timer set for 30 minutes from mark. Good work, Nor, Morgan said, surprising me with what seemed like genuine approval. Commander, we should go. As we hurried toward the escape pods, I found myself alongside Morgan in the corridor. This plan is insane, I told her. You know that, right? Sometimes insanity is just genius that no one else understands yet, she replied with a grin. If we survive this, I'll concede the point, I muttered. We reached the last remaining escape pod. Garrison was waiting for us, holding the hatch open. Hurry. Just as we climbed aboard, the ship's internal communications system activated with the harsh voice of the Korvaxian commander, Coalition vessel. Our scanners detect power fluctuations in your weapons systems. Explain immediately or face consequences. They've detected the torpedoes, I said, feeling panic rise. They'll disable them before they detonate. Morgan fastened her harness calmly. No, they won't. How can you be so sure? I demanded as Garridan sealed the hatch and initiated launch sequence. Her smile was positively predatory. Because I set them to detonate in 30 seconds, not 30 minutes. The escape pod ejected from the Relentless Justice with a violent jolt. Through the viewport, we watched the Korvaxian boarding vessels dock to our abandoned ship. You lied about the timer, Garridan realized, sounding more impressed than angry. Morgan shrugged. I anticipated they might detect the modifications. Better to surprise them. Seconds later, a blinding flash erupted from within the Relentless Justice. The explosion tore through the ship's midsection, exactly where the QF drive was housed. The shock wave caught several Korvaxian vessels too close to escape, destroying them instantly. The remainder of their fleet, thrown into confusion, began firing wildly, hitting their own ships in the chaos. Coalition Command will detect the explosion, Garridan said. Reinforcements will arrive within hours. I stared at Morgan in disbelief. You sacrificed a state-of-the-art Coalition vessel. I prevented advanced technology from falling into enemy hands, she corrected. And I'd say the exchange rate of 1 cruiser for 7 Korvaxian warships is favorable, wouldn't you? As our escape pod drifted away from the spectacular destruction behind us, I finally understood what made humans so terrifying and so valuable. They didn't just think outside conventional boundaries, they redefined them entirely. To Morgan, surrender wasn't defeat, it was just another tactic in a larger strategy. You never intended to give them 30 minutes, I said. That was just in case someone on our side objected to your real plan. Morgan took a sip from her ever-present coffee container. War isn't about playing fair, nor. It's about winning. They're going to promote you for this, aren't they? I sighed. Probably, she agreed cheerfully. Maybe you too. You did help modify those torpedoes, after all. Commander Garridan chuckled, the sound rumbling like distant thunder. I think we've all learned an important lesson today about underestimating humans. As we floated through space waiting for rescue, I couldn't help wondering what the Galactic Coalition's enemies would make of beings like Morgan, creatures from a death world who turned surrender into victory and chaos into opportunity. Perhaps the most frightening thing wasn't that humans were unpredictable, but that they might just be the perfect warriors for an unpredictable universe.
And the most frightening thing of all? I was starting to think like one of them. Say, Morgan, I ventured, have you ever considered teaching a class on alternative tactical approaches? She laughed, you volunteering to be my teaching assistant, nor. Maybe I admitted, someone has to explain your insanity to normal species. That's the spirit, she said, raising her coffee container in a toast. You might survive working with humans, yet. Against all odds, I was looking forward to it. And